Hi everyone, my name is Dr. William Lee and I am doing a review today of a book called Empusion. I don't know how to pronounce it, honestly. And I also don't know how to pronounce the author's name correctly, I think. It's Olga Tokarczuk. I don't speak Polish, but even in the languages that I do speak, I tend to pronounce things incorrectly. So anyway, that's the best I can do. And I have a bit of a connection, not so much to the book per se, but the book is about a young person who goes to a health resort in Silesia and for the treatment of tuberculosis. And I am actually here in Davos, Switzerland, another city that was renowned as a health resort specializing in the treatment of tuberculosis. And in fact, I am the historian in residence at a hotel here that used to be a tuberculosis sanatorium called Hotel Schatzau. It was Sanatorium Schatzau. Yeah, if any of you have watched other of my videos, then you know all this already, so apologies for that. My PhD is in Russian history. I don't have any degree in literature, but literature is something that I adore. So yeah, I'm here at Schatzalp. You can hear the church bells ringing, and unfortunately you can see that there's a mountainscape behind me, but you can't see the mountains, I think. At least when I look into the camera, I can't see the mountains. I think my camera always cuts off somehow the peaks of the mountain, so you just look like you have hills with pine forests. So, oh well. So I only recently read this book, and I've only read it once, and it kind of goes against my principles to do a review of a book that I've only read once. So it may be that when I read this book again, I'll rewatch this review and be embarrassed at my lack of insight, but I'm going to give it a try anyway, for two reasons, both because I'm a historian here in Davos, and I spend pretty much all the time that I'm here researching Schatzalp specifically and Davos during the sanatorium era in particular. So I was definitely interested in the book for that reason. And the other reason is the connection with the Magic Mountain, or I should say, in my opinion, the alleged connection with the Magic Mountain. The famous novel by Thomas Mann that was published in 1924. So it just celebrated its 100th birthday, and it was kind of a big deal here in Davos, which is where the Magic Mountain is set. This is essentially the Magic Mountain. And so Olga Tokarczuk came here and spoke, and unfortunately I wasn't here at the time. I think it was last October, and I had left at the end of June. And I didn't come for the fall that year. So I missed that, unfortunately. But she was asked to speak here specifically in connection to the event celebrating the 100th anniversary of the publication of The Magic Mountain. And when I was having lunch with a friend of mine the other day, and he'd read the book, and he showed me his copy, and then I bought a copy of my own, and I saw that on each of these copies, one was the German and one was the English. Unfortunately, neither of us read Polish. There was a claim made on the cover, not by Olga Tokarczuk herself, obviously, but by the publisher or the critics, reviewers. One of them called it a postmodern Magic Mountain, and the other one called it a feminist Magic Mountain. And one of the reasons why I've been inspired to do this review is because I don't consider it may be postmodern, it's definitely feminist, but the connection with the Magic Mountain just isn't really there, in my opinion. It's a book I've read about 10 times, probably more than 10 times. And the author very openly talks about how she took some elements of it from the Magic Mountain. The Magic Mountain, if you haven't read it, is also about a young man the same age as Tokarczuk's character. And in both instances, the young men are mildly, Hans Castorp isn't really even mildly ill, although he thinks he is, end up staying in health resorts. Hans Castorp at an actual sanatorium, and Mieczyslav Voynich at a pension, which there were also plenty of in Davos. So those were sort of like, they were establishments for people with illness, with lung disease, but they weren't the sanatorium itself. You would stay there because they were cheaper or because there were no vacancies at that time at the sanatorium. But anyway, both of the protagonists in both of these novels are young men who are trying to understand life and understand themselves and having a bit of an existential crisis. And so Olga Tokarczuk was basing her, to a certain extent, her protagonist on Hans Castorp, the protagonist of The Magic Mountain, and also satirizing his relationship with several men who, not several, basically 3 men who were sort of vying for the opportunity to be Hans Castorp's primary mentor. Hans Castorp was an orphan. So there's that connection between the setting and the protagonist, and the fact that both take place right before the First World War. But beyond that, that's it. That's all there is as far as the connection goes. So Olga Tokarczuk, like so many of us, liked The Magic Mountain, and she decided to have some fun with things that from The Magic Mountain. Very valid, great, but the thing that makes me wish that wasn't the emphasis with this book is that this particular book belongs to a very, very rich literary tradition that has nothing to do with Thomas Mann, and that is the Slavic literary tradition. And so when one of the first things I started to think when I was reading the book is Kafka. This reminds me of Kafka. He was, I think, Austrian Czech, Jewish, and I thought of Kafka almost immediately. Specifically the trial. And I love Kafka, so that to me was a definite plus. And along the way, I also thought very, very strongly saw a connection with Stanisław Lem, who was Polish and who wrote the novel Solaris. And it may have been translated into good English now, Solaris, but if there's not a new translation, do not read it, the English translation, because it's horrible. It's horrible. You'll miss the whole point of the book. So, read it in some other language. Read it in French. I read it in French because I was warned in advance about how the English translation just completely distorts it. Anyway, one of my favorite books, Solaris, and Gustav Meyrink, I don't know if I pronounce his name correctly. He, I think, was also Austrian, and he wrote a book called The Golem. He was not Jewish, but he wrote a book about this Jewish mythological figure of the Golem of Prague, and he was Austrian, but he had moved to Prague as a teenager with his mother. And then Bruno Schulz, another Pole, a Polish Jew who was unfortunately killed during the Second World War. He was in the ghetto in Poland, and he wrote he wrote primarily short stories, and there's a volume called Under the Sign of the Hourglass Sanatorium, and that is a strange book, but it has moments of absolute brilliance. There are moments when I am reading it and I think, oh, come on, Bruno, this is not even good writing. There are other moments that are absolutely sublime, and I see Schultz's fingerprints all over Empusion, and I consider that a good thing. because it's not like an author trying to rip off another author. It's like an author growing creatively from and building on what has come before. So finally, not finally, another book, Reich ohne Raum, by an author named Bruno Goetz. I think he was, I don't know for sure, I think he was around the Baltic, sort of that area. He was German, but I think close to the east. And Reich ohne Raum means kingdom without space. Unfortunately, it has not, as far as I know, been translated into any language but German. But the German is pretty readable if you're not advanced in German. And yeah, it's again, it's playing with the sort of ideas about nature and mysticism and things like that would make me put it in the same sort of continuum with Empusion. And then finally, another German work, but a German who grew up in what is now Gdansk, and at that time was called Danzig. So it had a Polish population and it had a German population, and he wrote a very famous novel called The Tin Drum, in German Blechtrommel, and a very famous and controversial movie based on the tin drum. And all of those just seem to me so clearly and so beautifully connected to Empusion that, it's, I hope people aren't too distracted by the whole Magic Mountain thing, because you're really going in the wrong direction with that. It's really just a whole different worldview and approach to things, where all these other books, all of which are written by men, incidentally, really are on a continuum, I think, with Empusion. So, postmodern, what does that mean? I thought postmodern was sort of passé now. I didn't think it was a thing anymore. So, I don't know, but postmodern it may be, but it's not a postmodern version of the Magic Mountain. Feminist it definitely is, but it's not a feminist version of the Magic Mountain. Okay, so if you are in fact a male reader, even though this book is all male characters, don't expect to find yourself in these men, because these men are really, they're caricatures. And they're meant to be caricatures, and they're even sort of cobbled together from bits and pieces of famous misogynists throughout history. So if you read the book, don't skip the section in the back that identifies in their dialogues, in their exchanges with each other and with the protagonist, a lot of what they say, it actually comes from, like I said, the world's famous intellectual misogynist. So you don't want to skip that. That's rather delightful. But yeah, they're caricatures. So you're not going to find them to be complex people, or people who you can relate to as a man. I felt that way from the start, and so then it was fun to see at the end what they had really been based on. And you have things that sort of make you feel a little uncomfortable. For instance, in the English translation, at least, the word cackling is used whenever these men are laughing, and we don't really associate cackling with men, do we? So that's kind of a tip-off, that there's something else going on here. Cackling is something that we associated, even not so much with women as with a certain kind of woman, a crone or a witch. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, if you're primarily interested in the feminist angle, I would say, there's another continuum to look at, and this one definitely, I would refer you to Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, which is splendid. It's not fiction. It was a lecture that she gave, but it's just a joy to read. And it's amazing, and I think I more appreciate Virginia Woolf's way of looking at, or way of offering the women's perspective about men. I think I appreciate that more actually than Olga Tokarczuk's. It's not satire, and And you have, for instance, her novella, Orlando, with a man who's immortal and sometimes is a man and sometimes is a woman. And she's sort of dealing with these issues in a more gentle way. Gentle isn't the right word, but not so sharp, not so sort of combative. But combative can be good. Don't let me discourage you. I will say, I should have said from the outset that I really, really enjoyed this book. I'm sure I'll read it again. It was a slow starter for me, but I then couldn't put it down. I read it in about 3 days, so that sort of speaks for itself. It's not a long book. On my Kindle version, it's 300 pages, and an easy read. What else do I have? I wanted to say that for me, very often in a book, there's a sort of apex chapter. There's sort of a chapter that ties, that brings everything together for me. It's not the conclusion. It's not the last chapter. It's not necessarily the dramatic apex of the book. But in a book like Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain, it's like 800 pages. It's harder to say what that is. But in this instance, there's a chapter very close to the end with a discussion between the young protagonist Voynich. I was trying there to merge the words protagonist and Voynich. Anyway, between him and his doctor. And it is amazing, and I wasn't impressed. Honestly, as much as I love the book, I wasn't impressed by the philosophizing that was being done by these various caricature figures. They were big questions that real philosophers whom Tokarczuk cites talked about, but when it's being done by these sort of cartoonish figures, then but I felt that this one chapter was so genuine toward the end and really food for thought in a way that the other philosophizing hadn't been. So you'll encounter that for yourselves if you read the book. Do I have anything else to say about it? Not really. I would love to know if she herself, I should have taken the time to look it up, but I didn't, if she herself has talked about her place in this Eastern European tradition. Poland, Czech, the eastern parts of Austria and Germany, Prussia, Silesia, Pomerania. One of the things that I'm doing here is going through all the guest lists for the people that stayed at Sanatorium Schatzalp. And when you're dealing with guest lists that come before the First World War, what do you do with all these different places? How do you do the statistics on the nationalities were here? Because if everybody here, registered, and if they list their country of origin or their country of residence as Bohemia, Pomerania, Silesia, Galicia, my geography has gotten much better since I started doing that. And that was one of the things I really enjoyed about this book, because it's one of the sort of subtopics of the book. The protagonist comes from Galicia and comes from a family that are very strongly Polish and proud of being Polish. But, they're, at least where they're under I believe the Austro-Hungarian emperor, the Habsburgs. And she goes into detail about that. You're reading a book by a Polish person who obviously understands the history of her country very well and has such a strong sense of it, and I appreciated that a lot. Anyway, I guess that's about all I have to say. I hope you read the book. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I wanted to say, just in closing, that one of the other things that prompted me to do this was I watched a review by a young woman, obviously very intelligent, who had read the book, and she was just absolutely confounded by the book. And I watched this review. It was spoiler-free. I watched it before I read the book, And I was expecting that it was going to be some kind of really wild, surrealistic literature, but it's not at all. I mean, she was talking about that she was so confusing that ultimately she couldn't recommend the book because it was just going in 100 different directions, and it was just so bizarre and so confusing that you couldn't make sense of it. And I'm kind of flabbergasted because I did not see that at all. I mean, I get confused as much as the next person with literature, but there was just nothing confusing in the book to me. Really, no mystification on the author's part. Not everything unfolds in the first chapter, but you know, you wouldn't want it to. And so I still don't get that. If you read the book and find it confusing, drop me a line, make a comment, because I'm really bewildered by that. Oh, and I should say, yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I only occasionally do book reviews when I feel like I have a reason for doing one. I did one on recently on Dr. Zhivago. I did one with a friend on the White chapter of Moby Dick. I started to do a series going chapter by chapter through the Magic Mountain, but that just wasn't, it wasn't getting enough views to really justify the amount of work that was going into it. But anyway, it's there if you want to watch any of that. And my main one that I do on a daily basis or in every other daily basis is on one of the patients who was here at Shatzel, Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich of Russia. He arrived in September 1939, and he died here in March 1942. So a time period far removed from either the Magic Mountain or the Empusion, but you know, anyway, you might enjoy it if you like sanatorium things in general. And all right, thanks for watching. Bye.